In recent years, Indianapolis has bathed in the limelight of international attention that was normally reserved for the Chicago and New Yorks of our country. There are many shakers and movers in our community, the private sector as well as elected officials, who in a large degree can take part for Indianapolis shedding its cornfield with lights image, that ball and chain that we had to lug around during our less thriving years. Yet if we take a closer look, there are others, former city leaders of past years, who helped lay the cornerstone of which this community has been built. You might say that they set the table for bigger and better things. I'm Rick Maultra. On today's edition of Hoosier History, we have the privilege to chat with three former mayors of Indianapolis, Alex Clark, Charlie Boswell, and John Barton. And they will share with you and me what it was like to be mayor during the time period in which they served. What were their greatest accomplishments, their greatest disappointments? What legacy did they leave to the city? And in retrospect, if they could do something different today, what that might be.
Most of the things I did were underground. Nobody could see them. We hadn't been able to get the money to provide for sewers, both interceptor and sanitary sewers, so we had to do that. Even back then, the sanitation plant was a problem, and we spent a lot of money down at the sanitation plant, built new incinerators, and had to build new retaining tanks. The water flowing by was pretty badly polluted, so we had to catch up with that. One little thing that I think was interesting, that Garfield Park, where I used to go when I was a young man, had a beautiful garden and used to have fountains. I don't know whether they still have them down there or not. But nobody done anything about it. Here was just all this. So I remember calling Russ Townsend in, not Earl Townsend, but Russ Townsend, father, J.R. Townsend. I said, well, he was head of the park department. I said, let's either plow it under or do something about it. So we put in the fountains and fixed them up. Interestingly enough, it had been done in the administration before. It probably cost us about half of what it cost to do when we did it. Mm-hmm. But money was, everything had been neglected because of the war, and it's nobody's fault, really. Taxpayers are paying to keep the war up, and money was scarce. Of course, our budgets weren't exactly what they are today.
Hi. Come on in. I'm Alex Clark, your mayor. We have something we want to tell you, something of which we are justly proud. You know, Indianapolis, your city and mine, is a great city, the greatest in the world. And we of the present city administration have done our utmost to make it far better than it was when we took over its guidance. We have tried to provide greater health and safety benefits for you and your children. We have tried to make your public parks more enjoyable. We have tried to modify the streets and thoroughfares to expedite traffic. And the application of good business principles to your city's management in order to save you money has been constantly in front of our minds. In all, we have tried to the best of our abilities to make Indianapolis a city of which you could swell your chest and say, this is my city.
In looking back when you were mayor, is there anything that you would do differently in retrospect? Anything that you would like to undo, or anything that you wanted to do but couldn't for one reason or another?
Well, you see, the mayor can succeed himself. When I was in, you could only serve one term. And we made a lot of plans that would be on a drawing board that you maybe couldn't get done in 4 years. I don't know whether it ought to go beyond 2 terms, although Mayor Hudnutt, I think, has done an excellent job. But it's awful difficult to plan these things and then feel that you can't see them through to realization, if you know what I mean. And no, not really. We had we just tried to keep the current things up. Streets had to be maintained. Traffic flow, we were instrumental in putting in the first one-way streets in Indianapolis, New York Street and Michigan Street, to take care of the flow of traffic that came from the east side and into the inner city and the west side. I remember the Indiana Avenue Bridge had to be replaced. We replaced that, and then shortly after that they widened the street and they took that bridge out. But it really was more of a housekeeping job and catching up with the things that we hadn't been able to do, really.
A flood of memories return, and it's just difficult to pick out the most important ones. I enjoyed the campaign of 1959 when I ran for mayor against a very fine young man, Judge Bill Sharp. Campaigning part of politics was enjoyable to me. During the same year, we had the Billy Graham Crusade in Indianapolis. At the first rally for this crusade, there were 35,000 people on the circle to hear Billy Graham speak. And I think the crusade unified the Protestant churches to a greater extent than it had ever been unified before. And that was a rewarding and warm experience. Then in 1960, a young man ran for the presidency. His name was John F. Kennedy. And I was co-chairman of his state committee for the primary of that year. I enjoyed working with him and the very talented young men with him. That whole group had many ideals. They had an understanding of how the federal government ought to be operated. They had great dreams for this country. And just being associated with them was a very fine experience. 61, the legislature was in session. Now, there are some who say you ought to run out of town when the state legislatures here in Indianapolis. The Democrats had control of the state Senate, and the Republicans had control of the House. But the parties did what was best for this city and passed some worthwhile legislation that year. They set up an airport authority, so the airport could have their own bonding limits. Park authority was set up so that we could issue bonds for the purpose of buying land to build more golf courses, to have more playgrounds, to meet the recreational needs of this community.
When I first went in office, you understand, of course, I told you before about there's some people were opposed to taking federal aid. Well, it was my contention that that wasn't charity, that was our money. We had the Eagle Creek project, which has been in the talking stage for many years, and Charlie Boswell had a lot to do with that. And it just so happened that we were able to finalize it, and the ground was broken for the dam, just 6 months after I went in. Now, another thing, they were arguing about the highways, whether they were going to be depressed or elevated. And they had been doing that for about a year. Well, I think the first week I was in there, I okayed it. My contention was the experts said it should be this way. I'm not an expert, so we'll go that way. And housing, the Public Housing Authority was revitalized. It had been dormant for years. In a very short time, we had approval from HUD for many units of public housing. We bought the Spink Arms Hotel for the elder people, and the Barton apartments were pretty much completed before I went out of office. And that was a big item in my book. Now, that was sort of contrary to the way we had been thinking before that.
During our administration, we ran the sewer, instrumental running, seeing the sewer was run so Glendale could be operated. Had to put the lifter stations in to get them adequate sewage so they could develop Glendale. We brought in Western Electric when I was here at the Chrysler plant, and we had to run a special sewer out so they could have adequate service. Those were things we were trying to do, and it all instrumental towards building for a bigger city. I'll tell you one interesting thing. Believe it or not, we had an off-street parking commission when I was in the mayor's office. The fellow's name was Luther Shirley, I think. because we didn't have adequate parking. As the years went by, they started tearing down buildings. And so they said, well, we've got more parking in these patchwork parking lots. So they started the building, and now what are we having? Don't have enough parking. We have, one of these days, maybe we'll have a reinstallation of the parking, off-street parking commission.
Is that a solution, do you think, maybe to the problem?
No, I don't think. I'm pretty sick and tired of bureaucracies and more commissions. I think something we got to do, and do it through. We can do it through the present government we've got. We don't need to create anything else.
Alex Clark deserves some credit for that. There had to be legislation to get the bonding we needed to build that new building. So it started sometime in Alex's administration, and the legislation called for the appointment of a building authority. And by the time they had laid the plans, I was mayor. And in order to build a new building to replace the old courthouse and the old city hall, we had to have the mayor's signature, and 2 members of the county commissioners had to sign off on the project. Only one was willing to do it. And one of the 2 who wasn't willing happened to be a Democrat who was going to run the next primary. And it was suggested to him by certain party leaders who will go unnamed that he wouldn't have much chance in the next primary if he didn't sign in on that project. That afternoon he signed.
Incidentally, this is what I wanted to say. Charlie's the one that got me started in politics.
He was.
He appointed me to the liquor board. In this interim period between the time I retired and when I went back as state police superintendent, I was working in private industry, and I saw where the head of the safety board had quit or something, so that job was open. So I talked to my brother Pat, who was close to him, about it, and Charlie said no, but he would. There was an opening on the liquor board, so he appointed me to the liquor board, and that was my first political appointment.
And that's how the political bug struck.
Well, apparently.
Why I was gotten in the job, and I was young enough, and I think eager enough to take on the challenges, despite the fact I had 2 children at that time. Looking back though, and I thought it was a grand salary. $12,000. No pension. The only perk you got, no health and hospitalization. Only perk you got was a car and a chauffeur.
I think Charlie Boswell said something along the same lines. He said you would only want to serve 1 term anyway because financially there's other things to go to.
Well, it was time to get back to the practice of law.
Yes. A very interesting aspect of our former city mayors is their association with former U.S. presidents. Alex Clark entertained General Dwight D. Eisenhower when he was in town. John Barton and his brother entertained the Kennedy clan at his brother's house off of Fall Creek Parkway. Then there's the story of Charlie Boswell, who had to read a speech on behalf of John F. Kennedy, who had a severe cold at the time.
I was in charge of then Senator Kennedy's primary effort here in the state of Indiana. And he agreed to come out to make several appearances. And the day before he was to get out here, he caught a bad cold and he lost his voice. So when he got here, I had to read his speeches before the various groups while he sat there and smiled and nodded his head. And on a Sunday evening, I read another speech for 8 TV stations. The taping was done at Channel 8, which was located in the 1400 block of North Meridian at that time. It was a delightful experience with me because I spent a full day with him. And Senator Kennedy and a man, his speechwriter, a man by the name of Ted Sarson, could use the prose like nobody else I've ever known in the political arena. And it was a real joy for me to read the prose and the ideas in this particular paper, which was written trying to get the support of the Democrats in the upcoming primary.
when John F. Kennedy first decided he was going to run for president, he came here. And my brother had a house over on Fall Creek Boulevard. Well, in politics, unless somebody's going to be a cinch, well, you have to be pretty careful. So everybody was pretty cautious as to who was going to entertain him. So my brother had a party over at his house on Fall Creek Boulevard, and then they went out to the Iron Skillet for dinner, you know where the Iron Skillet is, and then he went to St. Bridget's Church the next morning and took up the collection. And I have a letter here from him, a personal letter from John F. Kennedy thanking me for attending this. Of course, when people saw that he was going to be elected, then they all get on the bandwagon. But he and his Bobby was with him. I don't think Ted was. And this Salinger, is that the
Pierre Salinger?
Pierre Salinger, I believe he was one of the ones that was here. And we had this cocktail party over at Pat's house on Sunday afternoon.
Did you get to engage in much conversation with John and Bobby Kennedy?
Oh yes, but it was just, we were just friends, all normal people.
But when Eisenhower came here, we made plans to have him escort him through town and have him go various places. And went out to meet him early in the morning, brought him through up West Washington Street, over on Indiana Avenue, which, by the way, we were widening at that time. Took him by the Recorder, which the office was down on Indiana Avenue then, up by the Carpenters Union over on Pennsylvania, where we had our Republican headquarters. And I remember we went to the old Claypool, had lunch, and he spoke there. And then we went down to Lily's, and he went through Lily's, and then made a speech out of Butler that evening. The interesting thing in that car was a strange combination at that time. I had a driver named Tom Williams, and myself, and Governor Craig, who was then governor, Senator Jenner, who was running for re-election, and President Eisenhower, who was then general but hadn't been elected. And Jenner was, I don't think he was in great favor with Eisenhower at the time. Remember, he'd said something about Marshall being the greatest living lie or something. Great speculation to see whether or not they would hold up their hands at Butler and generally endorse each other, which they did. In other words, put their party above their own feelings, which is important in politics.
Well, sometime during my administration, President Johnson called the mayors of the 100 largest cities in the country for a conference in the White House. So we all went down there and had the conference and discussed the city's affairs. And then after that, we had a party and had dinner at the White House, and the cabinet was all there. And of course, that was very impressive. That's history. And it's nice to be a small part of history.
Now, you said you got to dance with Lady Bird.
Oh, yes. President Johnson danced with my wife, and I danced with Lady Bird, and the secret of it is that I can't dance.
How did you find the Johnsons personally?
Very nice. Exceptionally nice. He was a politician and a strong one. And he called a spade a spade. He didn't pull any punches. He told you what he thought.
Did you think that they were like regular people? You were telling me before that you were kind of surprised how they were just like regular people.
That's correct. That's what I found out. It was amazing to me, you know. I had never rubbed elbows with the president or the cabinet or anybody like that. And they were all very common people, just like us, wanting the same things, wanting the good things for our country.
Recently, I saw President Reagan speak downtown, and up until then, the only other president I saw speak was former President Johnson speaking at Monument Circle, and that was during your administration. Can you tell me why he was here to make the speech?
Well, he came here to make a speech for me during my campaign, and he he came in to the airport, and of course everybody met him. The senators and the mayors and everybody were out there. And then that night he made a speech. I think it was at the Murat Temple. That's where we used, before we got this elaborate convention center, we were cramped into that small place there. And he made a very good speech, and then he went back the next day.
And beginning January the 1st, 1959, I succeeded the mayor's office because Phil Bate, my predecessor, was elected prosecutor. And I ran in 59. This was in perhaps February or March. Senator Kennedy came out to speak to the Negro College Fund. And he spoke in the afternoon. That evening we had dinner at the Iron Skillet, which is only a few blocks from where we're sitting right now. Marion College girls were the waitresses there. And during the course of the conversation, I told Senator Kennedy that there were a lot of items in the newspaper about the fact he might run. And he smiled that warm smile which he had, and he said, well, Mayor, you know it's too early to talk about anything like that, but since you brought it up, in case I would decide to run, is there anything you could do for me? And I said, Senator, if I lose this election for mayor this year, there's nothing I can do for you. But if I'm elected, there's a lot I can do for you. I can almost assure you of the delegates from Central Indiana. He said, Mayor, in view of that, what can I do to get you elected? And I said, well, the best thing you can do is come here in the fall and address the fundraising dinner and get me enough money to pay our fine precinct committeeman and provide me some funds for a little advertising. He said, here's my private number. When you schedule the date, I'll be here. And he came, and that night of the dinner, we raised more money than either party had ever raised in one day up until that time. Now there's a lot more money and dinners raise a lot more, but up until that time we broke the record. And he gave a great speech, packed crowd.
In retrospect, when you think about things you might have done differently during your tenure as mayor, what do you think you might have done differently?
First of all, I wouldn't have run against Birch Bayh. I wouldn't have underestimated his great political talents and those of his wife, Marvella. I wouldn't have done that. Birch has told me since, it's a good thing I did, because he became so well known because of our fight, and he might not have been known well enough to have beaten Senator Homer Capehart in the fall. We're good friends, Birch Bayh and I are now, and he said I helped him. He didn't think so at the time, but he thinks I did, and I wouldn't have done that. It was ill-advised. I was persuaded to do it. It wasn't my desire in the first place. I was asked to do it. And I regret that. And I regret some of the harsh language in that campaign. Most of it came from me, not from Birch. Then the other thing I regret is I was involved in some factional fights, like we're having now in the Democratic Party, like we're having now in the Republican Party. And I regret very, very much my involvement in those factional fights.
Now, the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, that was something that you started, correct?
That's right.
And would you say that was one of your bigger accomplishments?
Well, I guess you'd say that, but that's not all my doings. I had advisors who helped me come up with these ideas. I'm sure you heard of Frank McKinney. I hate to mention one name because there were so many of them that you can't count them all and take all afternoon to give all their names.
Any good mayor has good advisors, right?
Well, that's the secret of his success. And as I said, it's the people of Indianapolis that are responsible for the city that we have today, and with the, I'd say, splendid leadership of several mayors. As far back as I can remember, we've had good mayors.
Now, the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, that is a committee that is still being implemented today, correct?
That is correct.
What is the function of the Progress Committee? How do they interact with the mayor's office?
Well, the idea I had was that you have to have support to get anything done. And with this committee supporting you in these programs, it's very easy to get these things accomplished. You know, you always get opposition no matter how good an idea you have. But when you had the Progress Committee behind you, it made it much easier to get your program through.
I like your bow tie. Is that a trademark of yours?
That is correct. I have always worn bow ties, but during that campaign, the blue with white polka dot bow tie became a symbol. We had them little metal bow ties made, you clip them on your coat or your lapel, and actually issued a lot of bow ties like the one I have on now. So it was kind of a symbol of the campaign. In fact, rather than have a bumper sticker that said any name on it, you just might have a blue and white polka dot bow tie on your car or your bumper.
And that says it all, right?
That said it all, yes.
You were mayor from 1959 to 1962. What was the hardest decision that you had to make as mayor? I'm putting you on the spot now, Charles. I know.
I really don't know what to say. I suppose the most difficult decision I had to make was leaving the mayor's office and taking the postmaster's position.
Now tell us about that. You resigned in 1962 because of that.
Yeah, because of that. Well, at that time, you could not run for re-election as mayor. And I was looking to the future, be certain that I had a job, and postmaster's position was for life. And this was, I thought, was a great opportunity, and I'd trained a man who followed me, a man by the name of Al Oshie, and I thought there'd be no harm in taking advantage of this opportunity. It's just like a governor being appointed to the Supreme Court or being appointed to the United States Senate. I just thought it was a further opportunity for me, and I had a good staff at City Hall and a good successor, and I thought it'd be all right, but I still felt a little guilty. No, more than a little guilty, very guilty, that I'd been elected for 4 years and I wasn't serving all those 4 years. Perhaps I should. But the guilt wasn't strong enough to keep me out of the federal building.
Of course, it's easy to be mayor of Indianapolis because of the climate of the people here. We have a very good class of people. They're conservative, they're good people. They want a good city to live in, and they've worked at that, and with the good leadership they've had from the other mayors, we have gone a long way. It's my contention that Indianapolis has the potential to be the greatest city in the country. Now, that might sound far-fetched, but I firmly believe that, and I think it's rapidly approaching that situation.
That's our look back at 3 former mayors of Indianapolis who helped shape our great city. Until next time, for Hoosier History, I'm Rick Maultra. Thanks for watching.